Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Powerhouse Podcast. I am your host, Candy Barone, and I am super thrilled as I have a powerhouse joining me in the ring today. I cannot wait to introduce you to my guest, but before we get into a formal introduction, let me just say hi to Debra Kasowski. Welcome. So glad to have you on the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Candy. I'm super excited to be here.
And I had the honor actually to be on Debra's show a little while ago, so it feels so great to be able to reciprocate and have the opportunity to share her brilliance, and you're going to see why she's such a powerhouse in just a minute. For those of you that may be joining us for the first time, know that this is our space to have those rich, meaty, juicy conversations around leadership and what it means to be leading in today's environment. And as always, leadership is truly a function of how you choose to show up, how you choose to serve others, and how you choose to take that personal responsibility inside those two spaces. And the conversations go a lot of different directions, which is always what makes this show so fun. So with that being said, let me tell you a little bit more about my amazing, incredible, just awesome guest that I have today. Debra Kasowski is the charismatic host of a thought-provoking podcast, the Millionaire Woman Show. Is committed to enriching the leadership potential of countless clients, essentially guiding them to go within to capitalize their true personal power so that they can achieve the measurable success they desire in business and life. She is speaking our song. After graduating with distinction, having earned a bachelor's degree in science in nursing, this award-winning 3-time international best-selling author, speaker, and certified executive coach spent many years as a clinical manager, excelling in leadership development before founding her own company, Debra Kasowski International, a world-class training and consulting venture focused on helping aspiring business owners and solo-prenuers develop the winning success habits that transform human potential into sustainable profits. Ooh, we're going to get into that. Clearly, if you are motivated to move beyond the mediocre, inspired to forge onto the forefront with a proven plan of action, there is no doubt that Debra is the indomitable force you need to take you there. And so I could go on and on. With that said, I want to welcome you again to the show, Debra. Thank you for being here.
You're so welcome. And when you say all that, I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm in Candy's stance.
Yes.
Just ready to go.
Yes, we're going to get in the ring, right? I mean, you are a freaking powerhouse, and it is like so awesome. I'm so honored to get to play in this space with you. And I know we were introduced just a little while ago even, and just have felt this really deep kindred bond to the work that you're doing and just who you are. And so let's jump right in. Let's kind of get in and talk about, you really are in a space to help people transform their human potential into sustainable success. And so I really want to talk more about what does that mean? That sounds like some really rich, awesome stuff. And I want to get into the nuts and bolts of what that really means.
Yeah. It sounds huge, right?
It does. It sounds big.
And people think it's so intimidating to step into success. But really, when it comes down to it, it is the little things that make the biggest difference. It's those daily habits, or those habits when circumstances happen. For example, if you run into conflict, are you a person who runs into the kitchen to deal with the conflict? Or do you back away hoping that someone else will extinguish it for you? So it's these habits that we form that really contribute to that bigger picture. And people, think, oh my gosh, how can I be a success? It's so much hard work, but it's the little things that you do daily that really contribute to that outward success.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. Talk about habits, right? Because a lot of people hear the word habit and they're already going, okay, I don't want to have to learn anything new. Don't have to try and create some new discipline. But when we talk about habits, what types of little things are you talking about that make significant difference? Because I think sometimes people take on habits for the sake of taking on habits and think they're doing the right things, yet sometimes it's that little tweak, like what you said, those little things. What would be an example of little habits that might help propel someone forward?
Right. So you can look at habits at different areas of your life, but what today I'm going to focus on is more of the leadership piece. So if I'm working as a CEO or in a leadership position, and this goes even for a frontline worker, because you are a leader no matter where you are, it's that you choose to lead. and it starts with leading of self. So those habits are really important. So a habit could be, I start my day by 15 minutes of planning of what my day will look like, really getting my mindset in the right place. So I might watch a short motivational video, listen to a short podcast or a piece of a podcast to get my mindset in the right place. That could be one habit. But planning out how my day will go. Then I might have different parts of my day that I might have a certain goal that I'm working on. I have it on a piece of paper. So at the beginning of the day, I might look at it. Another part of the day, I might visualize that goal coming to fruition. So 10 minutes, you might focus on that. At the end of the day, did my day go as planned? So you're doing some self-reflection. That's a habit, to really reflect and say, okay, on a scale of 0 to 10, how was my day? If it was a 7, what could have made it better that I could implement tomorrow so I can have a better day tomorrow? And then it's, again, reviewing not only the past day, but planning for the next morning. What am I going to do to set myself up for success? And I often tell people, clear off your desk before you leave for the day, because that way when you come in, you're not coming into a place of clutter. Your mindset's free, and you know that you've left everything at the end of the day.
So what do you do when, and I can already hear some people say, yeah, that's great, and that's really selfish of me to take this time. And I think about the fact that you work pretty exclusively with women. You work a lot around, your whole show is the Millionaire Woman podcast, right? And so I can hear some of those leaders that may be women, maybe not, but would say that, you know what, Debra, that's great, but that sounds selfish for me to take that time in the morning and the afternoon. How do they move past that? Or what would you respond to them for those that think that space, that self-reflecting space is selfish?
Yeah. And it's not uncommon to hear that. They're like, Deb, I can barely breathe. So let me just put it this way. In the whole scheme of things, if it was a total of 20 minutes, ideally 15 at the beginning and 15 at the end. But let's say I said you have 20 minutes. You have 10 in the morning and 10 in the afternoon to do the same thing. Don't you think it's pretty sad if we can't give ourselves 20 minutes? I don't see that as selfish. That's self-care, but also it prepares you to be in the right frame of mind to be exactly where you go. So this is where preparation meets opportunity. So if you did not do that planning and you kind of winged it every time you went into something, would you be 100% effective as you would if you've already got your mindset that you're going to be unstoppable, I'm going to be brave, I'm going to be vulnerable, I'm going to dive into the projects that I need to do and show up as my best self? Or by winging it, you're just pulling on how you feel in the moment, and it's driven by emotion, and it's not driven how you would if you had a clear mind.
Yeah. And I so agree with that, because one of the things we talk about a lot, and I play on this a little bit, because I feel as if so many people, that's an excuse for them, right? This is selfish. When I've really, I think there's a space that says selfish says this is doing this without regards to others, in spite of others, and
that's right,
because you think it's all about you. Self-full, which is the term we tend to use, says I'm doing this to serve others. And so what you just said, that preparation, when you create that space to set intention around how you choose to lead, how you choose to show up, that's a game changer. I don't think most people recognize that literally 10, 15, 20 minutes at the bookends of your day, the beginning and end, can truly significantly change a lot.
Well, I'd really like to impress upon people, if you imagined if everyone that you worked with did that, and you all came to the same table for a meeting, imagine how productive and effective and what a powerhouse rich environment you've already, because everybody's on their game, they're leaning in, they're ready to answer questions, they're ready to really get results. That changes everything. That's a game changer. If you could get everybody doing the same thing when it comes to being prepared and ready to share ideas and brainstorm, man, businesses would transform by just giving time for people to be self-full, to really have that at the beginning of their day and the end of their day, and really transform cultures for being leading edge leadership.
I love that. I love that term, leading edge leadership, right? And I couldn't agree with that more. I think we don't value how important our mornings and our evening time is for us to decide how we're choosing to show up. And then to your point, and I love the fact that you talked about measuring how you did it, asking yourself the big questions, because I think you got to get honest with yourself to say, where did I rock it today? And where did I dog it? Where did I cop out? Where did I like halfway, half-ass, whatever it might be? If we don't get honest with ourselves in that space, we can't truly step into that next whatever. And I know one of the things that you really talk about is that millionaire mindset. And I'm curious, because as we talk about kind of that leading edge leadership that you just mentioned, and we talk about those little tweaks, those little habits, how does that play into shifting someone then into more of a millionaire mindset, and how does one arrive there?
Okay. So one of the things with the Millionaire Woman Show is that it is about living life rich from the inside out on your terms. So when you show up in your best self, so that includes good, bad, whatever habits you have, everything is a compound effect. Everything that you do, if you look around you, everything is a result around you. It's giving you feedback. Your environment's giving you feedback. So if you're not liking something, there's something that needs to change, because everybody thinks, oh my gosh, that person needs to change. Oh man, you know what? She should have changed yesterday. Right. And that guy, he isn't even aware he needs to change. Those aren't the people that are going to change for you. It's you who needs to do the changing. So if you don't like something, one of the 3 top questions I always ask people is, what's working for you right now? What are the habits that are really driving your success? Those incremental things that you know really set you up and set you apart from other people. Because often the people who set apart, they're like, they're odd, they're a misfit. No, they have created a system for themselves to be that person that stands out. The person you call on to get things done because they know how to get things done. They've structured their life a certain way. Then the next question is, what is not working well? What is a habit that's holding me back from achieving the success? What do I know that I do that if I didn't do it, I would start getting the results that I want? And the example earlier was about avoiding conflict. That one is a huge one. Thinking it's going to go away, or waiting for months to deal with the conflict. And by that time, one person's forgot about it, didn't even realize it had an impact. And the other person's still holding the grudge, right? And then the last question is, how do I fill the gap? What's missing that I need to start doing to create different results? So when you start to, and I love questions. I have a book called Let's Be Curious. I want people to be curious about their leadership, the way they show up in the world, and you can be your best self on any one day. Whatever that 100% is for you on one day, these are all the habits that are going to lead to your success in being that millionaire mindset. Because here's the thing, as you mentioned, Kenny, that measurement of how my day went, or measuring what's working, what's not working. If you're not measuring, whether it be finances, your performance on a daily basis, what you're doing is you don't measure what you can't manage what you don't measure, right? And that includes money. If you're not able to measure it, you can't manage it. So you need to start looking at ways that and that's where SMART goals come in. People write all these goals and I'm like, so how do we measure it? They're often missing the measurable piece of how do they know that they got there?
Well, and there's a great saying that says, what you measure grows, what you don't stands still and dies. And so I think people don't realize that, yes, you need to manage money. Yes, you need to manage your focus. Yes, you need to manage your energy and how you're showing up. And I love that you talk about getting curious about your leadership. And asking those 3 questions, like what's working, what's not working, and how do you fill the gap in between? I think that's extremely powerful, not only from a awareness standpoint, but also from a personal responsibility and accountability standpoint. Because I do think, and to use your example of moving away from conflict, I think too many times people cop out because it's hard. I think they cop out because they don't want responsibility, therefore, versus understanding that them walking away doesn't change the fact that they're still responsible. responsible for that space.
Yeah.
And so I love, there's a friend of mine used to say, and I heard you talk about how we're so quick to point out those things in other people. And it's that phrase of you spot it, you got it, right? And it's kind of that place that if you're not checking, how's that working? What's not working for me? And what's the gap? When you're ready to offer that to someone else, before you spot it, you got it, you go, oh, how am I doing in that space?
Yes.
Before I need to give someone that feedback or that advice or that insight, which is the way people call it now, let me give you some insight. Yeah, so you're basically going to tell me what I'm doing wrong. And my question for people is to say, have you asked those questions for yourself? And are you doing the due diligence and the work? And so everything you're talking about, I think, plays into that space around those little habits start to change the game when it comes to holding ourselves at a higher level of accountability.
Because anytime we start pointing our finger at someone else, like if I'm pointing at you here on the screen there, Ken, got to realize if I turn
well, now, like, which way are we going? We got to see here, right?
3 fingers pointing back at me.
Yeah.
So I can point at Candy here, or I can point at someone else and say, look at you, look at you. But these fingers are pointing back at me. There's a mirror reflecting. There's something I need to learn here. So before we start judging and pointing fingers at other people, we need to look at why am I triggered by that? What is it about that? Maybe I show up as that sometimes, and I don't like that. So when I see it in them, it triggers me.
Absolutely. And that's when you say being curious about being a leader. That's the thing that we talk about a lot, is if the trigger's coming up, there's an opportunity to get curious, to say, where is that trigger coming from? Because that's probably not about them. It's something, and to use your term, mirrored back in that space. And I think there's so much opportunity for people there.
Yeah. And I like how you talk about people just don't want to deal with it, right? They dog it or they dive into it. And here's the thing. Conflict is conflict. Yeah. It's uncomfortable. I don't care how many times I've been in an uncomfortable conversation, a difficult conversation, whatever you want to term it as. It is a place of growth. If you're having discomfort, it's a place of growth. And in my work with appreciative inquiry, this is what I want people to think about. If you hear somebody venting, somebody complaining about something, that means they have a vision of what the ideal is. Mm-hmm. And I can either react and pounce on them, or I can have a responsibility. I have the ability to respond to the situation and just turn around and say, okay, I'll give you 2 more minutes. You finish venting. But after that, what I want to hear is you obviously have a vision of what the ideal looks like. How can I learn from you? And how is it something that might make us better? But if I didn't have that conversation to get through the vent, I don't get that richness of what can really help us move forward.
Well, and absolutely. You're hitting on something that is actually a hot button for me, and like really something I'm passionate about, because I truly believe that you cannot have communication without conflict. What we need to do is create environments where we're inviting and facilitating healthy conflict. Because truthfully, even when 2 people agree on something, how they arrive there, their experience, their expertise, their beliefs behind it, may not be anywhere in the same plane, that there's still underlying conflict, even if they agree on this one thing you're talking about. And there has to be conflict in the conversation. It doesn't work for us to grow and to, you're saying, move through those pieces if we don't invite that to the table and explore that and get curious. And so I love that you hit on that, because I think that it's amazing to me how many organizations, in fact, it actually frustrates me, how many organizations talk about managing conflict, and it's all about how to get conflict out of the environment. Yeah. And my response usually is, so then you're not communicating together. Because I don't understand how you can communicate without knowing that conflict's going to be present in that space. And when you have the tools to what you're saying, then you have the opportunity to choose how you react, how you set expectations, and how you can arrive at something that's kind of a solution inside that space.
And I also think the word conflict itself causes that tension inside. But we know in order for growth and progression to happen, change to happen, There's got to be an intrinsic change, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in order for someone to shift and have that awareness, there's got to be some form of tension. Mm-hmm. And in coaching, we call it that creative tension, right? That creative tension is where we get creative in how do we solve this? How do we focus on being solution focused, being results oriented, versus focusing that it's a problem. Conflict is not a problem. Mm-mm. But if you're using the terminology conflict, why don't you just shift and say, we need to have a discussion. We need to have a conversation and tell it what it is. We have different viewpoints. How can we learn from each other? We need to get to the table to lean in and learn and really, truly listen to the other person, not just hear them, but to listen to what's being said and really clarifying, what is your perspective of what I said? Because often people, I can tell you something, Candy, but if you interpret what I said differently, that's where we have a misalignment, right? If conflict's the word for you, change the word. It could be misalignment. We have a misalignment. We have a misunderstanding, whatever it is for you that makes you feel a little bit more comfortable. But I tell you, you're better to be in discomfort because you're growing.
Exactly. And I mean, if it's not big enough to make you, scare you, make you uncomfortable, whatever, there is no growth. Comfort is not growth ever. And, you talk about that ability to be able to listen to what they're saying. I also think there's that ability to listen to what they're not saying sometimes, because they can be in misalignment around, hey, here's the words I'm using. This is what I'm saying. And their body language and tone and energy is totally misaligned with what the words are. So I think you've got to be really present to look at both sides of that, right? And I'm curious, as you talk about creative tension, I'm going to turn this a little bit. Okay. When you talk about creative tension, I want to know where you've experienced creative tension recently as someone who is this thought leader and powerhouse, and you've been out there because, I think sometimes people look at the work we do and they're like, wow, you got it all figured out. You're just, Deb, that's easy for you. You've been doing this work, you teach this work, and I don't know about you, but one of the things I tell people all the time, I'm like, I'm actually more like a duck. I've gotten really good at poising the top half of my body, and underneath my legs are like, holy shit, I'm barely keeping myself above water. Speaking of attention, right? So I'm curious, how does that show up for you, or how has that shown up for you recently?
So creative tension can be when I'm working with other people. And it can also be within myself, knowing that I have to shift. So for example, I'm in the process of revamping and rebranding my website. I've rebranded a number of my other, business cards, all these other things, but the website is still the last piece, right? And I'm working with a virtual team of people thinking, I am so clear. I am telling them exactly from the point I walk through, this is where we're going to go. This is how we're going to navigate. Because in my head, I can understand what we're doing, right? So I get this piece of feedback yesterday, in fact, and it was, Deb, can you give me a little bit more direction on the instructions you sent? And I was like, I thought I was clear. So I sent her this email and I said, you know what? I wrote it out the way I would navigate it, but give me some feedback and I'll look at it tonight. And I got home and there was no email. And I thought, gosh, I'm wondering if she's wanting me just to sit with it. So I went and again, step by step, broke it down. She just wanted me to separate the pages. And I step by step went, no wonder if she gets to this part, she has no idea what I'm doing. And that creative tension to me is like, okay, so how do I communicate this virtually? Because I don't have that opportunity to have a face-to-face conversation. And it was in written words. So then I started using prompts like word blocks, highlighting, made sure I didn't use uppercase. And if I did use uppercase, I made sure it's qualified that this is a heading. That's the only reason it's capped, to really be very clear. And then at the end, I was like, okay, she should understand this now, right? Because when she did look at it, yeah, I know it because it's here, right? But when someone gives you feedback, you suddenly have this tension within you. It's like, what do you mean? Like you have this voice. It's like, I thought I was clear. And then when I went step by step, I'm like, well, I can see where she could get to a certain point, but then it's like, now what? So it was on me to make sure that I was more clear and how would I get more creative and creative in the term of how can I take a different approach? Because there's so many ways to get to the same place, but how can I articulate it so that another person truly understands what I'm explaining to them? And then to wait for her feedback back to say, yeah, we can go ahead now because I get it.
So I love that. I love that analogy. And I love that it even just happened recently, right? And we go through this every day. And I think the bigger you go and the more you're revamping and the more you're doing this stuff, creative tension shows up a lot. I will say, as someone,
Yes.
like, there's so much creative tension in any given day that some days I just want to pull the blanket up and crawl into the fetal position and be like, okay, seriously, a little less creative tension would be nice.
Yeah.
But I'm curious.
Sometimes it's,
go ahead, please.
Sometimes it's just this voice. Like the other day, I was talking to TEDx platforms here in Canada, and I was like, okay, I'm going to apply for this TED Talk. And I was like, messaged them. They said, yep, the deadline is March 28th. And then the next sentence was, we actually moved it up to March 15th, which is, I still had time. I had 2 weeks. I'm like, yeah, no problem. I'll get it done. And then this one day I sit down by my computer and I'm preparing for another talk for a group of accountants for International Women's Day. And what's on my mind? Just apply for the TED Talk. You need to do this. You need to do it now. And this prompting, and it just would not get out of my mind. So I knew I needed to just sit down, apply, and then work on my stuff, because there was no way. This creative tension was like, I'm ready for you. And I have to tell you, it flowed. It flowed. Everything I needed to write went out on paper, and then I was able to finish doing what I needed to do.
Yeah. Awesome. And I would assume, and maybe it's not a good assumption, but I'm going to assume for a moment, that wasn't always the path when creative tension showed up for you, that it was like, okay, I'm listening and drop in. Because I have yet to meet someone who plays in the space that we do and does the work that we do that has had it figured out from like infancy, where they're just like, ooh, creative tension, yes, go. I know, drop in, intuitively let it flow, game on. What did that used to look like for you? And when did you start to step into a space where you put some different strategies or approach or something? Because like I said, I'm making the assumption that that's probably not been something you've done your whole life.
No. Creative tension was only something that I really recognized about 5 years ago. Before that, there was times that creative tension is also about being able to trust yourself in that intuition space. Several years ago, I didn't trust myself, and it costed me like $20,000. There can be a cost when you don't trust yourself and you listen to what everybody else is saying, and they make it sound like they got it so much more figured out than you. And that was in my case. I was like, oh, well, you know more. Maybe I need to give you the decision-making power. And that's what I did. And hence that cost me. And then I had to pay the consequences of working harder, not smarter, to really get out of that space and really be able to get to a place of flourishing. But it wasn't until I started trusting, when I heard those prompts, and they don't happen all the time, but when I have listened, it's really gotten me to a place that I never thought possible, because it was like this inner knowing saying, Deb, you need to do this. You need to do this now. Or, Deb, remember this person you talked to? I might just have their name just pop into my head, and I'll be like, I need to connect with that person. So I go and call them up, and it's like they've been waiting for me, So I firmly believe that we are all pieces of a puzzle, and it's when we listen to that, we can fulfill other pieces of the potential that other people need to step into as well as our own.
Yeah. I mean, I always find it interesting, and I absolutely agree. There's times like you have that book that's been sitting on your bookshelf for 10 years, and all of a sudden you don't know why, but you have to. I mean, it's like a necessity, burning necessity. You have to pull it off the shelf and like voraciously consume it, like dig in, and all of a sudden it changes your life, and it's like moved you to a whole nother level. And I think, it's interesting because the signs come up all the time, and when you start flexing that muscle, because like you, it's cost me, I would even put hundreds of thousands of dollars if I were to collectively look at some of my resistance to listening to my own intuition and dropping into the signs that show up. I've had many times where the universe or whatever's had to come with a big old cast iron skillet or 2x4 and, hit me a couple times for me to kind of So you kind of do get into that practice. You're like, it's a little less painful when I recognize those signs when they start to show up and take action on them. And again, I think it comes back to what you started the conversation on, which is those little habits. Because I think when that intuition shows up, it's those little habits that make all the difference in terms of how you choose to move forward and how you choose to take action, right, inside that space. And so it's the little stuff, again, that you talked about that becomes then so powerful.
And people talk, like, again, they think it's like when they think meditation, they're like, oh my gosh, how can you sit for 10 minutes? Here, let me simplify it for you. Light a candle and watch the flame. That is a form of meditation. All meditation is doing is stilling your mind to be present in a moment. Yes. Maybe your form of meditation is walking in nature, being with silence. People avoid silence like the plague because they don't want to be alone with their own thoughts, because maybe that intuition might give them that clue that they need to do, and all of a sudden there's responsibility with it.
I was just going to say, and the reason that people don't want to be quiet is because they know they already have what they need to make the decisions, and they don't want to take responsibility. That word responsibility is why we have this culture of entitlement in the U.S. and even not so much in Canada, but in the U.S.
I think it's worldwide. We have a responsibility piece. We all have the ability to respond. So when we think of the word responsibility, we break it up into respond and ability. We have the ability to respond to situations versus being reactive.
Yeah, and I love that distinction, right? And breaking that word down into the actual components inside of it. Because what's always amazing to me is when someone says, well, I don't want to decide. And I'm like, wow, that's the most powerful decision you can make when you choose not to take personal responsibility. Wow, I actually sometimes I'm just baffled that people would so willingly, haphazardly just hand that over to someone else to create their future, because they don't want to make a decision. They don't want to respond. So they check out or opt out and don't take that responsibility.
And the funny thing is, Candy, they don't even realize that that's a decision.
Right.
They're like, that's not a decision. I haven't made a decision. Well, that is a decision right there.
The most powerful decision you can make is not making a decision.
Yes.
Oh, love that. So quick question for you as we're starting to get towards the end of our show. This goes so fast. One of the things I always like to ask people out when they're playing in this space, and I know that the way you show up and the way that you're leading others to tap into, more for themselves. What does that look like for you? If you were to imagine what's the big imagine if for you in terms of next level? Whether it be how you're getting your message out there, how you're connecting to people, realizing that leadership is a choice. It's everyone's game. It's everyone's responsibility. How you're connecting in that mindset. What's that big imagine if for you?
My big imagine is just to be on bigger stages. And when I say bigger stages, not the size of the stage, but be in front of larger groups of people, really. And my whole thing around leadership is about curiosity. I want people to realize that by asking questions, you are shifting perspectives, you are creating growth mindsets. And the other thing is, a lot of things can be solved by asking questions. We improve our communication by asking questions. We improve our relationships by asking questions. And we decrease fear and anxiety and stress by asking questions. And the biggest question you can ask yourself is, what can I do about it? What can I do about it? A colleague, friend, someone actually I just listened to recently was Dr. John Izzo, and he has a book called Stepping Up, and it's about taking responsibility. We all have that opportunity to contribute, but it's whether or not we're willing to answer that call. And then I challenge that by asking the question is, what is it that I can do? It might not be the game changer of everything. It creates the domino or ripple effect of change. Because when one person sees you, then the next person will say, hey, I can step up. I can do that. So start being the leader of stepping up, taking responsibility, and asking the right questions.
That's so fantastic. So how do people who want to continue this conversation with you. They want to engage with you. They want to learn more about what you're doing and how you're playing on bigger stages. How do they connect with you?
Well, they can email me at debra@debrakasowski.com. And in the midst of my website stuff, it's transforming from, the text and stuff to be a more visual and more minimalization on my website. So you'll see a lot more pictures, but definitely connect with me. Connect with me on social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. I'm on all of those platforms, and Twitter. I would love to hear from you. Listen to the podcast, The Millionaire Woman Show, and connect with Candy. And she has additional information. You can give me a call as well at 780-819-3891. But most of all, go to my website. Let me know what you're up to. I love to hear what people are up to and how they're being game changers in the world. And that's DebraKasowski.com.
Yes, we will have all that information for you down in the show notes because I really encourage and invite you to see the work that Debra is doing and the massive impact she's creating in the world to really help leaders step into such a powerful place for themselves and their business and create those sustainable profits, which I know all of you are looking to do. Please, please, please connect with her. She is truly, as you can see, a powerhouse and just a leader among leaders. And so again, feel so thrilled and blessed to have you on the show. Again, thank you so much.
And I can't wait to meet you in person, Candy, because indeed we are kindred spirits, really passionate about leadership, emotional intelligence, and really getting people to ask the questions they need to step up and be that leader they're born to be.
Absolutely, and I definitely have several hugs waiting for you when we
awesome.
in person. So all of that, our little love fest that we're having right now, if you were to leave our audience today with one really juicy nugget of everything that we've talked about, what might that be?
So if I sum up everything that we talked about, Candy, it's one of the things that I often see leaders get to a space of thinking that they gave away all their power. And as a leader, we have equal amounts of power, and it all starts by leading self and really examining your habits, all the small things that make you show up. And Marshall Goldsmith has a great book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. So one of the things that I want to impress upon you, if you are a leader wanting to step into the next level, you got to see and start thinking differently and asking yourself different questions, and surrounding yourself with people who are going to raise you up and really looking at those habits and the questions you ask. Those are the game changers, because when we start asking different questions, we get different results. We start taking different actions, and then we start seeing ourselves in a different light. And the final nugget I'll say, show up as who you want to be, and soon enough you will be.
I love that. Show up as who you want to be, and soon enough you will be. And ask those questions. And as you know, in order to do that, in order to show up as you want to be, so that you can be that leader, so that it starts with you being able to say yes to yourself, destroy the noise that's getting in the way, and recognize that leadership is ultimately a choice. It is everyone's opportunity. It is a function of how you choose to show up, how you choose to serve others, and how you choose to take that personal responsibility inside that space. Thank you all for tuning in and listening to another episode of the Powerhouse Podcast. Thank you to my beautiful, amazing, incredible guest, Debra Kasowski. And if you haven't already subscribed, please do so. We have so many more amazing guests and great topics to share with you. Until next time, please say yes to yourself and invite yourself to be the leader you are destined to be. We'll catch up with you on the next episode. Yeah.
Bye.